The U.S. President Joe Biden has announced a series of new partnerships with African countries that he touts as crucial for global success. Delegations from 49 countries and African Union, including 45 African national leaders, are attending a three-day summit, which is the first of its kind since 2014. Mr. Biden says the United States seeks partnership to foster dependence and spur shared success and opportunity. His comments come as Washington tries to check expanding Russian and Chinese influence on the continent. So, well, for more, let's bring in correspondent Nkechi Nnanna, who's live in Washington, D.C. Nkechi, can you tell us more about the AfCFTA signings and other issues around there?
Yes, Rufai, good morning. Thanks for having me. Now, you know, the United States' commitment to that project has actually sort of been questioned when you put it side by side with the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act. And that sort of changed yesterday with that U.S. signing of the Memorandum of Understanding with the new Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which has largely been sort of expected at the summit. Everyone has been looking forward to this, and it's a pact that would create a free trade market, one of the largest in the world, a continent-wide market totaling $3.4 trillion, with the potential to really lift 30 million people out of extreme poverty. And the agreement will help unlock new opportunities for trade and investment for both parties. And from the beginning of the summit, from the opening plenary, you had Ghana's President Nnanna really reiterating the fact that, look, it's time for Africa to replicate the sort of economic development and wealth creation model that the European Union has, where you have 75% of trade within the EU. And we know that the implementation of this project or program has been delayed for several reasons: COVID-19, the refusal of some of the signatories to ratify it. And when you look at the US, the number of what the US is doing, even since 2021, you have US government agencies really helping close more than 800 two-way trade investment deals across Africa, estimated over $18 billion. You really know that this is one of the achievements of this summit, Rufai.
Hi, thanks, Nneka. Now, what other agreements were reached on day two, apart from the MOU signing?
Yes, a lot of investment opportunities. I had a report earlier where President Joe Biden was really doting out all those investment opportunities that the U.S. has provided for Africa, and not just the U.S. government, also private sector. And so the second day of this summit really focused on increasing that two-way trade and investment between Africa and the U.S. You had the CEOs of private sector leadership from over 300 American and African companies coming together with the heads of delegation to sort of catalyze those investments in health sector, infrastructure, energy, agribusiness, and others. And one thing that sort of stands out with this summit is the involvement and the engagement of the private sector. Very important. It's not just about the US government and the African nations' governments. It's also about the private sector and their large sort of contribution when it comes to investment. And it's important because in most African countries, you see that the private sector sort of is ahead of the African government. So to say, they sort of see the future. Meanwhile, you have those African governments and their political leaders playing catch up to the creative industry when it comes to healthcare, digitization, entrepreneurship. So it's really important to have those private sector investments as well. There were a lot of them announced yesterday from Microsoft Corporation, and you also have Visa. But when it comes to departments and agencies of the US government, you had the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which had the signing of an MOU as well with the governments of Benin and Niger. They signed the first regional compacts totaling $504 million just to increase and support regional economic integration, trade, cross-border collaboration, and many others. Look, if I start doting out all the investment opportunities that were announced yesterday, I'll take up your whole show.
Well, President Biden met with President Buhari and other world leaders who will hold elections next year. Can you tell us more about the meeting the U.S. president had with those presidents?
You're right, Dr. Abati. U.S. President Joe Biden met with 6 leaders from African nations that will hold elections next year, and they say the meeting was to discuss a press for free votes. This was on the sidelines of the summit. You had our president, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, as part of that meeting. Obviously, we have our elections due in February. You also had President Tshisekedi of the DRC, who the United States has really hailed for agreeing to hold elections in his country. You know that he had sort of the country's first peaceful transfer of power. Then you also had Gabon's leader, Madagascar, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. And I think it was important for the United States to sort of mention that, look, we're not having this meeting with these particular countries because we have an issue or we have concerns. It's just a way to sit down and discuss in the build up to the elections next year, which is close by. We need to sit down and have a discussion of our renewed value of democracy, which is something that the Biden administration has been touting as the difference between their interest in Africa when it comes to China or Russia. And just pertaining to Nigeria, our own elections are less than 80 days away, and it's an election that could really strengthen or sort of set back our democracy. We have some good news in terms of the surge of voter registration, a wave of more civic engagement when it comes to Nigerian youth. And you also have some dangers, the risk of electoral violence, disputed election results in a country where you have political and really criminal violence at a really high level. It's reached new levels. And President Muhammadu Buhari, really at every opportunity he gets recently, has been reiterating the need for that smooth transition. If he doesn't leave anything for Nigeria, he wants his legacy to be that of a free election. And that's really the basis of that meeting they had at the White House with President Joe Biden.
Well, thank you very much, Nkechi. Thank you.